I'm Brian Lilly. A civics lesson for Kathleen Wynne. That is the topic of tonight's byline. That Kathleen Wynne needs a civics lesson shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. This is a woman that, as we've shown you, needs a history lesson. Pretty much every time that Wynne gives a speech in Toronto, she opens it up by saying that she's on traditional Native territory.
It's wonderful to be here with all of you. We're all here gathered on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit.
Except that the Mississaugas of the New Credit sold the land that Toronto sits on in 1787. And they moved out towards Lake Erie, past Brantford, Ontario. They even got a bump-up payment for that sale in 2010. They don't claim the land, but Wynne claims it for them. Why? She doesn't know her history. And this weekend, she announced that she wants her Attorney General, the provincial Attorney General, to review a newly passed federal law. And that shows that she doesn't know her civics either. We have a constitution in this country, although the way the leftists act, you'd be hard-pressed to know it. For all the lip service that they pay to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, well, that's just part of our constitutional law. Leftists actually hate the Constitution itself. So they find ways around it, claim it doesn't matter which level of government does what, as long as the people are looked after. But it does matter. It matters greatly. Our country was established as a confederation of provinces, where the provinces have some powers and the central government, the feds, have others. It laid out pretty clearly in sections 91 and 92 of the Constitution who was responsible for what. The feds are in charge of national issues, the provinces local issues, the ones that are closest to the people. The Constitution starts out with giving powers such as public debt and regulation of trade to the feds, and then gets into a very long and specific list. Let's look at the end of the list. Number 24, for instance, Indians and lands reserved for the Indians, naturalization and aliens, that means immigration, marriage and divorce. All right, the criminal law, except the constitution of the courts of criminal jurisdiction, but including the procedure in criminal matters and the establishment and maintenance and management of penitentiaries. So let me repeat one on that very important list for you. Number 27, the criminal law. The feds are in charge of criminal law. Why do I bring this up? Because on the weekend, a criminal law passed by Parliament came into effect, and it is now being challenged by Wynne and her government. It's known as Bill C-36, or the Protection of Communities and Exploited Persons Act. The long title? An act to amend the criminal code in response to the Supreme Court of Canada decision in Attorney General of Canada v. Bedford, and to make consequential amendments to other acts. So this is a law passed by the federal government to change the criminal code. Leave aside whether you support or oppose legalizing prostitution, whether you support or oppose the government's stand, their approach on this. That's not the point. What we have is a federal bill to amend the criminal code, an area of federal jurisdiction, and then we have Kathleen Wynne, a provincial premier, asking one of her provincial ministers to review the law. She was also asked to do this by 25 city councillors out of Toronto who, again, have no say in federal jurisdiction. Here's what Wynne said in a statement on Sunday. I am not an expert, and I am not a lawyer. But as Premier of this province, I am concerned that this legislation, now the law of the land, will not make sex workers safer. Well, it is clear that she's not a lawyer. I don't think you need to be a lawyer to be a politician or premier. In fact, I'd like fewer lawyers running the country. But I do think you need to know how the country operates. Wynne went on. The legislation was duly passed through a democratic process. The Attorney General of Ontario is bound to enforce the criminal code, and she will. But I have also asked the Attorney General to advise me on the constitutional validity of this legislation in light of the Supreme Court's decision in the Bedford case, as our options as a government in the event that the legislation's constitutionality is in question. We must enforce duly enacted legislation, but I believe that we must also take steps to satisfy ourselves that in doing so we are upholding the Constitution and Charter. So now she's also trying to take on the court's role. She's claiming to uphold the Constitution, but her actions are actually doing the exact opposite. If Kathleen Wynne wants to change the criminal code, she has options. She can resign as Premier, run for Team Trudeau in the next federal election next year. I'm sure she'd be welcomed by Justin. It's not up to the premiers, though, to interfere in provincial jurisdiction, just as it's not up to the Prime Minister to interfere with provincial jurisdiction. Do we want the feds trying to second-guess how Ontario schools should run, examining those laws, examining the curriculum? Do we want premiers trying to direct the army? Obviously we don't. But that's essentially what's going on here. We have one criminal law for the whole country, and we can't have provinces cherry-picking which ones they like. If Kathleen Wynne feels differently, she knows what to do next. Resign. And that's the byline.